Hello everybody, it's Kathy Gonzalez and I'm here with another Milestone Maths webinar. Today we're going to be exploring the topic Mastery versus Spiral Explained. Is the wrong method ruining your child's confidence with maths? If you've been in the market for a maths curriculum, you've probably heard the terms mastery and spiral, and you may or may not know what they mean. So today we're going to look at that and we're going to see which one is the best for you and your child. First of all, we're going to look at exactly what each of these two terms mean. So mastery methods are curricula that involve very few topics studied during the year. Each of those topics has its own dedicated chapter and you study one topic and then another. You'll find very infrequent reviews in a mastery maths curriculum. There will be some reviews. Typically you'll have a chapter review, but that will only review the subject that was in that chapter. And then you'll have mixed reviews maybe once or twice a year. One thing though with most mastery methods is that the teacher can choose which chapter they study when. So you don't have to follow the order that's presented in the textbook necessarily. The advantages of a mastery method is that the child gets to study each topic in depth. That can be, excuse me, because the child's studying each topic in depth, that can be quite a bit less confusing for a lot of children. And there's flexibility built in for the teacher because you get to choose which topics are studied when. If you think a child isn't quite ready for a particular topic, you might move it towards the end of the year and bring something forward from the back that might be a bit easier. The disadvantages of mastery methods include that essential skills often aren't reviewed enough for a child. I'm talking about tables and number facts, algorithms that need to be learnt. Usually they're presented once and the child's expected to know them. They're supposed to keep practicing until they get the hang of it and then they're expected to know and keep remembering it. But that's just not the case with all children. So children will forget and have to relearn those skills when they come up again next year or in following years. Because of that, if you actually want your children to retain the information, you'll need to have some kind of supplemental review. And good teachers will recognise this and they will provide extra drill programs or whatever is required to make sure that their children learn what they're supposed to. But this is the kick. It means that you must have a teacher involved in developing and delivering a mastery program. The teacher at the very least is going to have to decide what chapters are what's studied in what order and be able to gauge when the child is ready to move forward. For that reason, a mastery program can be very teacher intensive and most of the mastery programs available definitely are. And if there is a spiral review, it will be a tack-on as essentially just another supplement that's been provided by the author of the mastery program. With a truly spiral method program, the ones that are marketed as spiral, you find that they tend to scatter topics throughout the entire year. So they might do addition one lesson, subtraction the next lesson, geometry the next lesson, and then go back to the beginning. They can spend as little as one lesson each time around that spiral. Now, often in a spiral program, the review section is longer than the main lesson section. And there won't be any meaningful chapter divisions in a spiral program. One of the most famous spiral programs has 0 chapters at all, which is lesson 1 to 160 or whatever it is. There's another spiral program out there where they do have chapter divisions, but they're just arbitrarily every 13 lessons or whatever number of lessons. With a spiral program, it's very difficult to rearrange lesson order. You must study them in the order that they're written. There's pros and cons to that. It depends on your learning style. And the other thing that some people find as an advantage is that the lesson length tends to be fairly consistent. In a mastery program, when the topics are really easy, the lessons will get really short. And when the topics are a little bit more complicated, the lessons can get quite long. With the spiral method, because the bulk of the program is just review, most of the lessons tend to run about the same length. Now, the advantages of a spiral method is that there is less prep and teacher involvement required, generally, with most of the spiral programs out there. The fixed lesson length means it's easier to manage your time and also the expectations of the student. The student knows once they've finished that fixed length of the chapter, of the lesson, they can go and they're free. Also, because there's constant review, there's definitely no forgetting of skills. Okay, the disadvantages of a spiral method are that the constant change can be quite confusing to some children. As I said, they can often be changing topics every day, and a lot of kids need a bit of time to let ideas sink into their heads, and changing from one day to the next is just going to confuse them. For the same reason, the spiral methods tend to give you a very broad view of a topic but very little depth. And it can be very difficult to get a big picture view of mathematics, which is really what a kid eventually needs to adopt to be able to get good at maths. It's generally impossible to change the order of lessons in a spiral program, and pacing them can be very difficult. Now, I'm just going to show you that actually this whole distinction is a little bit artificial because there's no real mastery mathematics program. Every single mathematics program, and definitely the syllabus, is actually built on a very wide, slow spiral. So the very first books in the maths curriculum, say grade 1, they're going to start with counting, and then they're going to introduce the idea of addition using concrete materials, pictures, stories. The next year, the child will learn how to count to higher numbers. So again, we're going to start with counting. Then we're going to probably present addition in its abstract form with the symbols and the numbers. And then they might get introduced to multiplication in a pictorial form, maybe with concrete materials as well. And we keep going like this all the way through to when we get into early high school, where the child's learning numbers into the millions and the billions and the trillions. They might start getting algebraic symbols introduced, but they're still doing addition and subtraction back at where, like they started early in year 1. And they'll now be working on fractions, again with the same operations they've been working on all the way through. So the same topics keep coming up over and over again, just in more depth and more detail. So really a mastery program is just a very slow spiral. And what the programs that get marketed as spiral programs are what I call hyper spirals. They're just really hyperactive, and their spiral is very short and very windy. I propose that the best thing for a person and for a young child to learn maths is a hybrid between these two. Really, a child needs to spend some time on each topic. They should be spending a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever time it takes to adequately address that topic and studying that one topic. But at the same time, they can afford to be doing a little bit of review of what's come in the past. And I get this approach from the way I learnt mathematics. I was very fortunate to have the one teacher from all the way from year 8 through to year 12 in high school. And this is exactly how he taught us. We never saw a textbook. He basically had us write essentially a textbook he composed over those 5 years. And we would study a topic in class at great depth. And then for homework, we would have spiral review, and it would be revision all the way back, as far back as he thought was necessary. If there was something that we'd forgotten from 3 or 4 years beforehand, that would come back into the review. Generally, it would only go back to the beginning of the year or maybe the middle of the year before. But like I said, it would be where he gauged that we needed the revision. And that meant that as a class, we never ever had to study for an exam because we knew our subject inside out, and we could just walk into an exam and perform at our best without really knowing what exam stress was. But that means also that the maths that we learnt stuck, and it stuck for a long time. So there's a basic core set of skills that every child who studied mathematics should have, and I believe that the schools really fail on a lot of these. Obviously, a child should know how to count, and everybody should be able to count and count well. You should know your number facts. You should be able to add easily, especially to numbers within 20. Everyone should have a good grasp of their times tables and be able to multiply single-digit numbers. Everyone should understand basic algorithms for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. There's lots of different ways you can approach these algorithms, and I'm not a big stickler for one over the other. Whatever works is good. But you should know an ordered process to be able to work things out in the event that you don't have technology present, or in the event where it's actually going to be more difficult to get an accurate result. So, for example, if you've got a big column of numbers to add up, using a calculator is a recipe for making a mistake. Whereas if you've got them written down, it's much easier to check your calculations as you go. Everyone should understand fractions, percentages, and ratios. This not only stops you getting ripped off when someone is offering a sale or through deceptive advertising, it's also very useful for you in general life in doing things like converting recipes or mixing like petrol ratios for your 2-stroke lawnmower. There's lots of places where understanding fractions, ratios, and percentages can be quite good. The other thing about having this basic set of skills is this is the core set of skills needed to be able to move on to higher level mathematics. And if you've given your child a really strong foundation in these basic principles, they can then move on to algebra and therefore be qualified to get easily into TAFE and become to study whatever trade they may want to study. Or they could even go further and go into algebra, then calculus, and be able to go to university and study the sciences, accounting, or engineering. It's all about giving your child the best possible options they could have and giving them a big, broad field to choose from. Now, with Milestone Maths, we cover these basics and we cover them thoroughly all through primary school. And as we move into high school, we will be going into the algebra and the academic mathematics, but we'll be doing it in practical ways so that even if your child doesn't intend to go any further with their studies, they will have a good foundation of logical thinking, which is extremely useful, and the foundation of critical thinking, which is a skill that everybody needs today. So I hope you found that helpful. With Milestone Maths, we have built in this spiral review structure along with the mastery idea, where we study a topic to as much depth as is required to get the idea across at the level that we're currently studying at. And it results in a very powerful learning combination, and I've seen the results in numbers of children already who have got a very deep understanding of their mathematics, which is quite rewarding.